specifically when it comes to training, are there areas for you that are more of a struggle than others?
Yeah, I mean, in general, the physical side of climbing has never come that naturally to me. I'm not naturally that strong. I'm not like a gifted athlete in other ways. Well, actually, that might not be fair. I think compared to the broader human public, I probably am a gifted athlete. But compared to elite climbers, I'm definitely not gifted in any way. Like my fingers are much weaker than all of my peers. You know, yeah,
Just like
basically
raw finger strength you're talking about, like how hard you can pull on an edge?
Yeah. By pretty much any metric of finger strength, I underperform relative to my peers, which which I manage with good technique, good footwork, like everything else, basically like good execution. Like I would say I'm a pretty good climber in general, but I'm not that strong of a climber. Certainly not relative to the level at which I climb.
So you train that up?
Well, yeah. So I mean, in theory, I should be focusing more on the physical side, and I kind of am. I mean, in particular, the last several months, I've been really emphasizing the physical side a little more, and I have actually been feeling a little stronger. But that said, I mean, I've like dabbled in physical training for climbing on and off for my the entire 25 years that I've climbed. It's just that when I was younger, there was a lot less known about it, and I was training in different ways that were probably less useful. But that said, basically for me, physical training and climbing is always a bit of an uphill battle. Like that is a bit of a struggle.
So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Try to peel back and learn a little bit about what your routine kind of looks like. I've read at least that you've worked with Jonathan Segrist as a coach. You've worked with Lattice in that program. How do you structure your training, knowing that if the focus is to train up finger strength?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm specifically focusing on finger strength. I would say that I'm sprinkling in finger strength throughout a more holistic, like, I don't know. I mean, we could do a whole episode on like training and managing. I mean, part of the problem for me is that I climb full time. And so, anytime you do a training program, it's generally focused around the training. So you basically rest for your training days. And if you're trying to train finger strength, you basically should be rested for your finger strength sessions. So you basically should be prioritizing your whole life to revolve around hangboard sessions, which for me is just not acceptable, basically. Like I'm willing to hangboard. I'm willing to work hard as a climber. I'm willing to do all the training. But it's like, realistically, I want to climb more than I want to hangboard. And so right now, for example, I'm using, like as you said, I worked with the Lattice guys a couple years ago, and I found that incredibly helpful while I was doing the Free Solo film tour, because I didn't have access to actual rock climbing for 6 months. And so it was really helpful for me psychologically to have sort of a spreadsheet, a training plan, basically like to be on a program, to have some reason to get out of bed every day. Like I'm actually working towards something. And so I really enjoyed having that training program. Right now, I've sort of adapted the Lattice type of program to what I feel like for me is a little bit more of a long-term, basically I'm climbing outside 3 or 4 days a week. I'm climbing inside once a week, mostly just to moonboard, like to do some like limit bouldering. And then I'm doing a bunch of supplemental stuff at the house. So like some hangboarding, some one-arm pull-up stuff, and then a bunch of just, core, leg lifts, front levers, planks, things like that. Basically all the like supplemental things like stretching,
Right. And then on the days that you're climbing outside, are you also, like, are you doing 2 a days? Are you climbing outside and then coming back and 6 hours later loading the fingers?
Yeah, not even 6 hours later. I mean, often I just, occasionally, like, I'll skip my last pitch of the day at the crag. Let's say I'll skip the random pitch that you would do as like the endurance burn or like the extra thing, and I'll save that energy and go home and do a bit of a hanging session or do a bunch of pull-ups and leg lifts and things like that. Which and I know that this isn't like an optimal way to train if you're trying to see finger strength gains, but it's a nice way to live. It's like I'm still getting my climbing. I feel like I'm improving. It's a nice, like it's working well for me. I don't know. It's kind of like the long term. I think. I mean, we'll see. But and I've kind of gotten into this because I'm looking at fatherhood now, and I'm kind of looking at not traveling quite as much for the next many months, basically, as we have a newborn. And so it makes sense to sort of take the long, gradual approach to like steady gains, where like each 3 or 4 week cycle, I just improve a little bit. And I'm like, over the course of many months, like it is starting to work for me. We'll see.
It, you've been somewhat, I don't know if vocal's the right word. You've at least alluded to a desire to climb 15A. Is that the focus of training up right now? Like, is that the goal?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the obvious. Like, in my life, I would love to climb 515. And I kind of feel like as a professional climber, I feel like almost a slight obligation to climb 515 at some point, considering they're, 16-year-olds and things that can manage that no problem nowadays. So, yeah, that is definitely an aspiration. I wouldn't say it's a concrete goal because there's no set route and there's no time frame for it and there's nothing obvious. I mean, there are a handful of 515s around my home in Las Vegas. But the problem, though, is that a couple of them, if I did them, they wouldn't be 515 because I'm using E-bars. Basically, it's just like I'm doing the style a little bit differently. And so, and then the other established things like Jumbo Love, which is 15B, which I haven't tried, but it does seem like a bit of a jump. It seems a little daunting.
That thing looks gnarly, yeah.
Yeah. It seems impossible. But, maybe someday I'll go try. But we'll see.
Well, yeah, well, I appreciate you, kind of getting a little nerdy on the training there. I think for a lot of the people who are listening here, although not climbing at the level you are, there's something relatable that you don't have, admittedly, superhuman tendon strength. Maybe the things that like Sharma or Tommy or whatever were kind of like, they just have been able to pull hard.
No, I would say Tommy is actually much the same as me, though he started climbing earlier and started training hard sooner and basically had a higher level at an earlier age and all that. But I actually think Tommy is more of is not like a physical specimen the way some people are.
Yeah, that's
like
interesting.
Chris Sharma, I think, is a good example of just physically gifted. I mean, you see the way he climbs and he dangles from holds, and you're like, what? And he as a child was dangling from holds that, when you think that him as a teenager climbed Necessary Evil with horrendous beta, like campusing the crux type of stuff. I mean, and that's a route known for tiny, tiny holds. And I still can't climb it, It's like, I just like, geez, he climbed that after a year and a half. And he was a kid with terrible technique, terrible footwork, and he could just claw his way up that wall. And I was like, that is a gift.
All right, y'all, just a quick 30-second shout out here for today's sponsor, which is the Crimped app. And I'm telling you, I love Crimped. Long before there was a YouTube channel, I was using Crimped to program my training because it takes the guesswork out of things. We're too busy to worry about this stuff. Open up Crimped. You can either load in a program like a sport plan or a boulder plan, or you can choose from the hundreds of exercises and protocols that they have in there to figure out your week. And at the end of each day and at the end of each week, you get to check them off. You know what's happening. You know what's coming. It will level up your training. I love it so much. Check it out. Hit that link. You can download it for free. All right, let's get back to the interview.
Yeah, that's nuts. But that's a really great comparison to draw, though, like the Tommy of it. Because Tommy and Chris were kind of like coming up in the comp times at the same times. They started climbing around the same time. But as we know from Tommy's history, and he writes about it so well in the push, he trained really freaking hard from being like a little kid, like to the point where like I remember like a story that he wrote where his teachers didn't believe how many pull-ups he did and this kind of thing. Like they thought he was lying on his sheet. But how I think how cool for the rest of us mortals out here to know, like, it is a long game, finger strength and the skills that are required for, I mean, it's a 3-legged stool. And so there's tactics or technique rather, and the mental side, of course, and the physical side. But Tommy shows that you don't have to be born with Chris Sharma's tendons. You can just be a friggin' monster at training and get there.
I mean,
so
honestly, not even a monster. You can just stick with it for a long time. Because, I mean, so many things in climbing, like stronger tendons and ligaments, connective tissue takes a very long time to adapt to stimulus. And so, you just play the long game. You just slowly, like, if you can consistently grind away at something and avoid injury and basically maintain, like, a relatively healthy lifestyle, like, you will see long-term gains. And it's just, slow and steady progress. Like, one way to look at it is that if you can improve by 1 grade a year, which doesn't really feel like that much if you're training consistently, within a decade, you're climbing the hardest routes in the world, which is like kind of a crazy way to think about it. But like, I mean, if you keep training and you go up a grade a year, by the next decade, you'll be climbing literally the hardest routes in the world. Like that's that's something. It's like just long, slow, steady progress.
Yeah, that's something to get psyched about. Now that you just said that, like I think that's pretty rad. I'll be climbing into the 14s in 5 or 6 years. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's
I mean,
great.
isn't that kind of wild?
It is really wild to think about, and I do love that about climbing because you can find so much efficiency in proper technique as well, so that even as you in your 50s, your top end power might start to decline, you can make up for that. And there's plenty of people in their 50s and 60s who are crushing into the 14s. So
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm climbing with a 61-year-old who still could climb 514. He hasn't technically sent it any recently, but basically he's like a 514 climber. He has much stronger fingers than me, objectively. Like he hangs with crazy amounts of weight, and he's 61. I'm sort of like, it's slightly embarrassing when you're like, oh, I'm getting burnt off by the 61-year-old, but that's Bill Ramsey. He's an incredible climber.
oh yeah, that's great. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's good motivation as well. Okay, one more question on training, and then we'll shift gears to nutrition. I came across this John Backer quote recently where he was talking about training for his biggest kind of raddest solos, and was talking about how he would do 50 fingertip pull-ups, which was way overkill. But he like his quote was something to the extent of, I don't train so that I can do the moves. I train so that I know that I can do the moves. So he has that, I'm assuming, that confidence when he goes out and puts it on the line on a solo. I've heard a quote from you that was almost kind of maybe the other side of the coin to that, where I think initially when you were working on the free rider, you had it in your mind like you wanted to climb 14D, and that would like put you in a place where you knew you could like go and do it. But at some point in time, you started to shift away from your weaknesses and really build up your strengths. And so I'm just curious to learn about like kind of what that moment was, or when you decided to make that shift. And obviously it worked out, but do you think that was, the right course of action?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not exactly the other side of the coin with that, because I mean, I totally agree with the John Backer quote that a lot of training isn't so much for the training itself. It's the confidence that comes with knowing that you've prepared as much as possible. Because it's not as if anything he's doing requires doing 50 pull-ups on a small edge. Though actually he did solo a few very hard faces where it probably helps to be able to do 50 pull-ups on a small edge. But his point being that when he goes soloing, he wants to know that he's as prepared as physically possible. It's like the confidence that knows like I can't be any better at this than I am. Therefore, I'm bringing the best that I can to this. But my quote that you were just mentioning with the free rider is like a slightly different idea, and it's sort of a subtle difference. But my point was that for years I thought that if I got strong enough, the free rider would suddenly seem easy. If I just like got super, super strong, I would look at El Cap and be like, now it's easy. And basically at a certain point, I realized that just wasn't going to happen. That, like, no matter what grade I climbed, it wasn't going to be easy. And so instead of focusing on my weaknesses, which is climbing harder grades, I may as well just play to my strengths, which is being able to climb easy grades with a lot of control and like feel very, very solid on relatively easier grades. And so it's not so much that I abandon the pursuit of difficulty and all that, but it's just that I realized that I could see success on El Cap without having to be a 14 plus climber. I could just be rock solid on low 513, which basically, and actually I mentioned that as not like when I do corporate speaking and things like that. I mean, it's kind of it's not a unique idea that if you want to improve, you work on your weaknesses. If you want to perform, you play to your strengths. It's like, so I spend most of the year working on my weaknesses, like training fingers, doing all those things. But every once in a while, you want to go out and do something rad. And those are the times where you should cater to the things that you're just uniquely good at, or, the things that you're best at.
Yeah, that's great, man. I think that's really valuable advice for again, us weekend warriors, where we spend a lot of time training, a lot of time at the gym, or a lot of time, just at the home, little Woody. But when we want to perform, we want to get into that send season and push our grade, we should be looking at routes.
Yeah, look at what you're best at.
Yeah.
Like if you're a good endurance climber, like go climb the really long endurance route, because I think it's easy to get sucked into like what you've been training and all that. But it's like, realistically, do the thing that you're good at doing and do the thing that you like doing. It's like, if you like big trad routes, go work on a trad route, It's like you can spend most of the year forcing yourself to boulder or train or hangboard or do all those things to improve. but long term, it's like, what do you want to do and what do you enjoy doing?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I think that's really good advice. I don't
just
like
gave you
climbing.
permission to. I just gave you permission to go back to Joshua Tree and do some trad climbing. You're like,
That's
thank God I can leave the red. Yeah.
That's exactly what I needed, man. Honestly, although I also just got like eaten alive on epinephrine. So like I don't know if big walls is my thing either. I don't know what it took me 12 hours to get epinephrine, and I think you did it in about 40 minutes. So
No, 34, I think, or 35.
yeah. I mean, just right underneath my time. Although in my defense, it was a party of 3, so it took a little bit longer bringing each guy up each pitch.
Yeah,
but still,
that never helps. Yeah, well, that's I think one of the interesting things in climbing is that something that was a weakness. When you work on it long enough, eventually you start to see it become, like, if not a strength, then at least something that you're totally comfortable with and feels pretty good. And I'm actually seeing that on some of the things. Like, I've lived in Las Vegas long enough now, and I've been climbing on overhanging pockets all the time. And overhanging pockets used to be everything I was worst at in the world, like open-handed pockets that was just like I just couldn't really do it. And now I wouldn't necessarily say it's a strength, but it's getting close. Like, it might actually be a strength soon, where I'm like, I feel pretty good at this, and like it's just like slowly changing.